The trick to the appearance page is that you write it before anybody sits down. Colleen Mulcahy had learned that at 19 from a woman who had been writing records since before she was born. You get the names first. You get the spelling first. You ask them at the door while they are still shaking snow off their shoulders and pretending they are not nervous, because once the proceeding starts, nobody will tell you anything twice. So she stood by the conference room door on the 4th of February with a legal pad and asked 9 lawyers to spell their own names. 8 of them did it wrong the first time. The 9th one spelled it slowly, the way you would for a child. Outside, the ice had been coming down since before dawn. Not snow, the other thing, the thing that arrives as rain and lands as glass. Every branch on the block was already twice its own weight. Somewhere below, on Weybosset Street, a car alarm had been going for 40 minutes, and nobody was going down to see about it. 9 lawyers read that contract. 2 flew in from Boston at their own firm's expense to read it. 1 had a printed copy with tabs in 5 colors and had read it, by his own count, 11 times. 91 pages. Every page of it read by somebody with a law degree and an hourly rate. The only person in that room whose job was not to read it was the woman sitting at the short end of the table with a machine on a tripod. She was the one who found what they missed. Her machine had 22 keys, and none of them said anything. That was the part people could never get past. They would lean over during a break and say, "How do you type with no letters?" She would say what she always said. She was not typing. She was writing sounds. Then they would nod and go tell somebody at the coffee station that the girl says she writes sounds. You press the keys in chords. 5 at once. It comes out as a syllable. The initial G sound needs 4 keys held down together because there is no G on the left bank, and the first month you learn it, you feel like somebody asked to play the piano in oven mitts, and then one day you stop thinking about it forever. She wrote 240 words a minute, clean on 4-voice question and answer, which was 15 more than her certificate required. She had gotten those 15 by doing the local news out loud at her kitchen table for 2 years. She had briefs for everything. A brief is a shortcut, a single stroke that stands for a whole phrase you are sick of writing. Hers were personal, the way everybody's are. 1 stroke for Assistant United States Attorney. 1 stroke for objection to the form of the question, which in a room like this one would come up 11 or 12 times before lunch. Her briefs were hers. Nobody else's dictionary would translate them. If you took her paper notes out of her bag and put them in front of another reporter, that reporter could give you maybe 70%, and the 70% would not be the part that mattered. She had also learned over 9 years the thing they do not teach and cannot certify, which is that you can hear who is lying in a room by who stops talking. Not the liar. The liar keeps going. The liar has prepared. It is the 2 men on either side of him who go quiet, who stop shifting in their chairs, who stop clicking their pens, because their bodies have understood something before their faces have caught up, and there is a half-second of nothing where the room's small noise drops out, and if your ears are on the room instead of on the words, you feel it like a change in air pressure. She heard it 4 times that morning. She wrote it all down anyway because that is the job. The record does not have an opinion. They called her the reporter. Not once in 3 years had anybody in that firm said her name inside a proceeding. She was in the caption of every transcript she produced. She signed and sealed the certification page of each one. Her name was printed on 400 and something bound volumes in that building's storage room. In the room, she was the reporter, the way the coffee was the coffee. That was not a complaint. That was the design. A record is supposed to be a window, and nobody thanks a window. But there is a cost to being furniture, and the cost is that furniture hears everything. Lawrence Corvese came in at 9:10, with his coat already off and his reading glasses already on. Everybody called him the Deacon, and had for 30 years because he read documents out loud, standing up with his chin lifted, exactly like a lector at the 8 o'clock Mass. He was 66. He had a habit of tapping the table twice before he began, 1, 2, the way a man knocks on a door he already owns. "Good morning," he said to the room. "Good morning," he said to her, which was more than most. His son came in behind him. Renzo Corvese was 34 and had the kind of face that photographs well and reads badly. He carried the closing binder himself instead of letting anyone else carry it. He set it down at the center of the table like a man laying a wreath. She had reported him maybe 60 times. She knew his verbal habits the way a bird knows a window. He said, at that juncture when he was buying time. He said, correct, instead of yes, when he was sure, and that's correct when he was not. He did not know he did that, because nobody knows what they do. The buyer arrived last and did not apologize for it. Gennaro Iannucci was 41 years old and ran cartage and bonded warehousing out of a yard on the waterside of Allen's Avenue, which meant in the plain language nobody used in that room, that things came off ships and went onto trucks, and some of those things were on the manifest. He was not a large man. That surprised people. He had the shoulders of somebody who had loaded trucks before he owned them, and hands that had been broken and reset more than once. His grey suit had been made for him, and not well. His coat was too heavy, too old, and had been rained on for years. He did not shake anybody's hand. He sat down, looked at the exhibits stacked at his elbow and said, 91 pages. 91, Larry Corvese agreed. 91. He said it back like he was weighing it. That was his thing. He repeated the last 2 words you said as a question, and it made men explain themselves without being asked to, which he suspected was the whole point, and had never once seen him admit. The proceeding went on the record at 9:22 in the morning. She struck the first stroke, and the room stopped being a room and became a transcript. For 2 hours and 10 minutes, 9 lawyers walked the document, article by article, recitals, definitions, representations, the survival period, the indemnity basket. The deacon stood and read the operative language aloud in his lector's voice. Somebody objected to the form of a question, and there was no question, because it was not a deposition. Everybody laughed at him. She wrote the laughter as a parenthetical, because laughter is not a word. At 11:40 in the morning they got to the exhibits. Renzo Corvese slid a single sheet across the table with a signature tab already flagged on it and said, Exhibit F is the nominee designation. Standard. It just names the taking entity. The taking entity, Gennaro said, purchaser and / or its nominee. Page 1, the defined term. You'll recall we built it that way in October, at your request. She wrote it. Her hands did. The rest of her went very still, because that half-second happened again, the drop in the room's noise, and this time it was not 2 men. It was 6. Gennaro Iannucci did not look at the page. He looked at Larry Corvese, and Larry Corvese, who read everything out loud, standing up for 30 years, did not stand up. Sign it, Larry said, sitting down. He signed it. Small, cramped, pressed too hard, the signature of a man who does not enjoy writing his own name. The proceeding went off the record at 11:51 in the morning. Somebody said the ice was supposed to stop by 4. Somebody else said the Boston flights were already dead. She broke down her tripod and folded the paper notes into the tray. She got her coat off the radiator by the window where she always put it, because a wet wool coat left on a chair stays wet all day. It gave off the warm sheep and rain smell it always gave off when it dried, and for 1 second she was 8 years old in the back of her mother's Buick outside the courthouse on a February morning exactly like this one, waiting with the heater ticking for a woman who was inside making a record of something. Then she picked up her bag and went out into the weather, and nobody said goodbye, and that was normal, and she did not think about it, and that is what invisible is. She lived on the second floor of her Aunt Dot's 3-decker on Bow Street, up on the hill above the yard, in an apartment she paid $400 a month for that was worth $1,100, and the fact that she could not pay $1,100 was a thing she thought about every single time she came up the stairs. The stairwell had a dog in it, not a dog that lived there. A dog named Biscuit from the first floor that had free run of the building and slept on the landing. And in weather like this he came in wet and the whole stairwell went thick and doggy and warm. And Dot would not say a word about it because Biscuit had been there longer than Colleen had. Her arithmetic went like this. The agency took 40% off the top, and the agency was Bernadette Topper, who had put her through certification and had earned it, so she did not complain out loud. What was left came at 90 days, sometimes 120, because law firms pay reporters last. She carried her own equipment and her own software license, which was $1,400 a year. Also her own insurance, which she thought about the way you think about a tooth. Her ranking never changed. Software license, because without it she has no trade. Phone, because the agency assigns jobs by text at 9 at night for 8 the next morning. Car insurance, Aunt Dot's $400, which Dot did not need and would have forgiven, which was exactly why it never went late. Her mother's headstone, which she was paying off at $95 a month to a monument company in Cranston and had 11 payments left on. Peg Mulcahy had written records in that city for 31 years. She had reported 4 murder trials and a governor. She had died at 60 of something that had been in her chest for a while, and her daughter had been given her machine and her tripod and her paper tray and the nickname. The nickname came from the kitchen table. Colleen was 7, and she used to sit under it and click her teeth in time with the machine in the next room, and her mother said it sounded like crickets on a porch. After that, she was cricket to everybody who had ever met her mother, and Colleen to everybody who had not. She started the transcript that night at 9 because the expedite fee was 75 cents a page, and she wanted it. The apartment ticked. The ice had put a limb of Dot's maple down across the wires on the corner, and half of Bow Street was dark. Hers was not. She felt guilty about it the way you do. She ran the file. Real-time translation gets you maybe 96%, and the last 4% is the whole job. You go through by hand. You fix the untranslates, which sit in the text as raw steno, like somebody sneezed in the middle of a sentence. You resolve the conflicts. You listen back on the audio for the parts where 2 men talked over each other, and you decide, as the person with the legal authority to decide, what the record says. She got to page 141. Renzo Corvesi. You'll recall we built it that way in October, at your request. She stopped. She sat back in the chair and looked at that line for long enough that the screen dimmed itself. Because she had been in October. She had reported that session too, the negotiation, 4 months earlier, on the 16th of October, in the same room, with fewer lawyers and no binder. And what she had in her head, in the place where she keeps things, was not a fact yet. It was a shape. It was the shape of a man leaning back from a table and saying something short. She got up. She went to the closet where the paper notes lived, 3 years of them tri-folded in flat boxes, dated on the end in marker in her mother's system, and she found October and pulled the fan of paper out and put it on the kitchen table under the good light. Steno paper is not English. It is her English. 22 keys, corded in a theory she had inherited and then bent for 9 years until it fit only her hands. She found the 16th of October, page 50-something, and read it the way she reads, which is not left to right exactly, but down. And there it was, in her own strokes, in her own brief for the phrase, the thing the man had said. Nothing goes in my name. Not the yard, not the spur, not a mailbox. She read it again. She turned to the executed agreement on her laptop, page 1, the definitions, and read the defined term for purchaser, and then Exhibit F, which was 1 page and 11 lines, and named as the taking entity, as the nominee, in a document she had watched him sign without reading. A natural person. Gennaro P. Iannucci. Individually. 9 lawyers had read that contract. Not one of them had been in the room in October. She did not sleep, and at 7 in the morning she drove down the hill on roads that had not been treated in a car that was 10 years old and honest about it, and went to see the deacon. Larry Corvez was in his office with the lamp on and the overhead off, which is how men of that generation sit at 7 in the morning. "Cricket," he said. He was the only one there who used it. "You're early. Nothing's happening today. Half the state's out." "Page 141, she said. He took his glasses off. "I'm producing the transcript. I have to certify it. So I'm telling you before I certify it." She stayed standing. "On the 16th of October, in that room, your client said, out loud, that nothing went in his name. I have it. It's 4 seconds long. On the 4th of February, your son told him Exhibit F was standard and named him personally as the nominee, and your client signed it in about 1.5 seconds. Larry Corvesi looked at the window. There was nothing to see out of it. The ice had frosted the glass over from the outside like a bathroom. "Do you know what our exposure is on a scrivener's error?" he said. "That's not what I asked you." "You didn't ask me anything." "No," she said. "I told you something." He put his glasses back on, which is a thing men do instead of answering. "You write the record," he said. "You don't read it. That's the arrangement, and it's a good arrangement, and it's the only reason anybody lets you sit in the room." Which was true. That was the awful part. He was frightened. She had known him for 3 years and had never once seen that, and she stood there long enough to feel the radiator come on and start burning last summer's dust off its fins. "Have a good day, Mr. Corvesi," she said. "Larry," he said to her back. "The subpoena came on Tuesday. It came to Topper Reporting Services on Waterman Street, because that is where the jobs live. Bernadette Topper called her at 8:10 in the morning and did not say hello. Federal grand jury, sit down. I'm driving. Then pull over, Colleen." She pulled over on Hope Street next to a house with a boat in the driveway, a 22-foot boat, shrink-wrapped in February, in a neighborhood where nobody has ever put a boat in the water. Bernadette read it to her. It commanded the production of all stenographic notes, all audio media, all rough drafts, and all translation dictionaries relating to a proceeding on the 16th of October at the offices of Corvese and Corvese. 9 days. Assistant United States Attorney Adele Kirchner, District of Rhode Island. "Translation dictionaries," Cricket said. "I know." "Bernie, translation dictionaries." "I know what it means. I've been doing this since you were in a car seat." It meant whoever wrote that subpoena had been told how a court reporter actually works. It meant somebody had explained to a federal prosecutor that a reporter's paper notes without her own dictionary are 70% of a sentence with the important 30% missing. Prosecutors do not know that. Reporters know that. Lawyers who have spent 30 years watching reporters know that. And there were, at most, 11 people alive who knew the 16th of October had been reported at all. "They want the machine too," Bernadette said. "They listed the machine." They can't have the machine. They can have anything they want, sweetheart. That's the whole point of the word subpoena. Sit tight. I'm getting us a lawyer, not from that firm. Cricket sat on Hope Street with the engine running and the wipers going and looked at the shrink-wrapped boat, and the thought that arrived, uninvited, was that she had 11 payments left on her mother's headstone, and that federal contempt was a thing you could go to jail for, and that if she went to jail, the monument company would keep sending the bill to the apartment, and Dot would pay it, and never mention it. That was the part that got her. Not the jail. The car came for her that night. It was not a black car. That was the first thing that was wrong with her expectations. It was a grey minivan with a Cartage Company magnet on the door and a child's booster seat folded up in the third row. The man driving it was about 60 and wore 2 coats. "You're Peg's daughter," he said when she got in. "I'm sorry." Peg Mulcahy. She did my brother's trial in '96. He was guilty as sin, and she wrote down every word of it and never once looked at him like he was garbage. He pulled out. "Ozzy Ferrucci. They call me 2 coats. "Why?" "Because I wore 2 coats for 11 days one winter and wouldn't take the inside one off. Everybody figured I was cold." He put his blinker on for a turn nobody else in that city would have signaled. "I had a cast on. Didn't want the boss knowing I broke my arm. 29 years ago, and it's still my name." They did not go to a house. They went to a coin laundry on Chalkstone Avenue that was open until 11 and had 4 machines out of order and a television bolted to the ceiling playing a basketball game with no sound. Gennaro Iannucci was folding shirts. He had 6 of them done and 8 to go, and he was doing it badly, the way a man does when he learned from watching and never asked. He had a roll of quarters in his coat pocket. There was nobody else in the place except a kid doing homework at the far end with earbuds in, who did not look up once and clearly came every Tuesday and clearly did not care who anybody was. "Sit," he said. She sat. Orange plastic, bolted to the wall. "You went to Larry." "I went to Larry." "To Larry?" He shook out a sleeve. "And he told you to write the record and not read it." "He did. He told me the same thing about my own business for 11 years. He folded the shirt in half, then in half again. Wrong, so it would crease across the chest. "What's your name?" "Mulcahy." "Your name?" "Colleen. Colleen Mulcahy." He said it once, flat, the way you set a box down. Then he went back to the shirts, and she understood with a small shock she did not like, that he had just done the thing nobody in that building had done in 3 years, and had done it while doing laundry, and had not made any occasion out of it at all. "Tell me what I signed," he said. Here is what she told him in a laundromat over the noise of a dryer with a bad bearing. The purchase agreement, page 1, defines purchaser as Narragansett Cartage Realty, Limited Liability Company, and / or its nominee. Those 4 words do all the work in the document and cost nothing to read. Every one of the 9 lawyers read them. They are not unusual. They exist so a buyer can assign the closing to a subsidiary at the last minute without redrafting. Exhibit F, executed at the closing table on the 4th of February, is the nominee designation. It is 1 page. It names the person or entity that actually takes title. It named a man. "So the yard on Rolfe Street," she said, "and the spur and the 2 buildings on it, including 1122, went into your name, not the company's, yours, personally, and the deed was recorded at City Hall on the 6th, which was Friday, which was 2 days after you signed, which is fast." "Fast," he said, "very fast, in an ice storm. Somebody walked it in." He set the shirt down. "Now here is what it does," she said. "I'm not a lawyer. I've written 11 forfeiture proceedings, and I can hear the difference between a company being in trouble and a man being in trouble. When the government wants to take property under the racketeering statute, they have to connect the property to the person. If a company owns it, they have to prove who controls the company, who benefited, who knew. That's a year of work and 3 cooperating witnesses. If a man owns it in his own name, in the land evidence records, in his own handwriting, then he is the one who owns the building where the thing happened, and every fact about that building becomes a fact about him. "What thing happened?" he said. That was a non-answer aimed backward. She let it lie there. "I don't know what happened in that building," she said. "I don't want to. My job is that I know what was said in a room in October and what was signed in a room in February, and that those 2 things are not the same thing." He looked at her for the first time properly. He had a face that gave you nothing and hands that gave you a fair amount. "Say the October words," he said. "Nothing goes in my name. Not the yard, not the spur, not a mailbox." He was quiet for a second. "That's it," he said. "That's what I said." "That's what you said. I have the strokes. In my hand, on my paper, dated, with the audio time-stamped to the stroke. And the government wants the paper. The government wants the paper and my dictionary, which means somebody told them the paper is useless without the dictionary, which means the person who told them is somebody who has watched a reporter work for a very long time." He picked the shirt back up. "How much do they pay you?" he said. $3.75 a page, and I see about 60% of that in 90 days. 90 days. 90 days. For the thing that decides what a room said. He shook his head once, not at her. "That's stupid." "It's the arrangement. It's a stupid arrangement." He folded the last shirt, wrong again, and stacked it, and stood there with both hands flat on the pile. "I need you to read me the whole thing. All 91 pages. Out loud, in a language I own, and tell me every place where the paper says something different from what a man said. That's 40 hours. I have 9 days. You'll hate it." "I'll hate it," he agreed. She did not start that week, because on Thursday morning she had a job she could not get out of, and the job was Renzo Corvese. It had been on the schedule since December. A civil case, Superior Court, nothing to do with any of this. A beneficiary of the Rolfe Street Realty Trust, suing the trustee over the sale price of the yard, claiming the property went out the door under market. Ordinary. Money and cousins. The kind of case that pays a reporter's mortgage and never makes the paper. The trustee was Renzo Corvese. The deposition was in a conference room on the 4th floor of a building on Dorrance Street, with a broken vending machine in the basement that had dispensed nothing but oyster crackers since 2019, and had a sign on it that said, "Out of order," and, under that, a different hand. Except crackers. She set up. She wrote the appearance page. She asked everybody to spell their names, and Renzo Corvese said, "You know how to spell my name, Cricket." And she said, "Spell it for me anyway." And he did, and she wrote it, and nobody in that room understood that she had just put on the record that he was told to spell it, and did. Then she sat down, put her hands on 22 keys, and wrote a man committing a felony for 2 hours and 40 minutes without moving her face. The lawyer taking the deposition was a woman named Odile Fanning, who worked out of a converted house in Pawtucket and had a habit of asking the same question 3 different ways, an hour apart. Cricket had reported her before, and liked her in the private way a reporter is allowed to like anybody. At 10:10, Fanning asked how the buyer had been selected. The purchaser entity was designated by the buyer's principal, Renzo said. Designated when? In October, at the negotiation session. Who was present? Counsel, the principal, 2 people from his company. Was that meeting transcribed? And Cricket's hands wrote the question and then waited, floating the way they do above the keys. No, Renzo Corvese said. She wrote it. N-O. 2 strokes. It went onto the paper and into the file and onto the screen in front of both lawyers and into the world, and her face did not change, and her hands went back to the home position, and the radiator in that room knocked twice the way that buildings' radiators always did, and the clerks in that building called that sound the plumber's cough. And she thought about that instead of what she was doing, because you have to think about something. He believed the October transcript did not exist, which meant he believed it had gone somewhere. At 11:50, Odile Fanning asked for a readback. Can you read me back his answer about the designation? 20 minutes ago, thereabouts. This is the one power a reporter has. Everything else about the job is receiving. The readback is the only moment where the room stops and waits for you, and you scroll back through the file to the mark you set, and you speak, and what you speak is not your opinion. It is the thing itself, returned. She found it. She read it in the flat voice you use, no inflection, because inflection is testimony. Question: designated when? Answer: in October, at the negotiation session. Thank you, Fanning said. Mr. Corvese, I want to be precise. The nominee designation, Exhibit F, to the purchase agreement, the one-page instrument that names the individual grantee. Was that document in existence in October? The concept was, that's not what I asked. At that juncture, the substance had been agreed. Sir, the document, the piece of paper. In October, did it exist? And Renzo Corvese, who said correct when he was sure, and that's correct when he was not, said, that's correct. Cricket wrote it, and something in her chest went very quiet and very warm at the same time, which was a thing she would think about later and be a little ashamed of. Because Exhibit F carried a document footer. Every instrument out of that firm did. A 10-digit job code and a date stamp generated by the document management system when the file is created, printed in 6-point type at the bottom left of every page, which no one reads, and which she had transcribed the top line of into the record on the 4th of February when the deacon read the exhibit's title aloud, and which said, in numerals nobody in that room had bothered to look at, that the file had been created on the 29th of January. 13 days before the closing, 3.5 months after October. He had just sworn to a date that his own footer contradicted. They went off the record at 12:20 in the afternoon. The lawyers packed up. Renzo Corvese put on a very good coat and said, "Thanks, Cricket," and she said, "Mr. Corvese," and he was out the door before he could think about why that landed wrong. Odile Fanning was the last one in the room. She snapped her case shut and said conversationally, "That October meeting. If it had been reported, who would have the transcript?" Cricket did not look up from her tripod. "You'd want the job number," she said. "Agencies keep them forever. That one would be with Topper reporting on Waterman Street, and you'd want to ask for it by date, not by case name, because there wasn't a case name in October." Fanning stood very still for a second. "Huh," she said. Then she left, and Cricket folded the legs of the tripod in, 1, 2, 3, the way her mother had taught her, and went out into the cold with her hands shaking, which she noticed only when she could not get the key into her car door, and she got it on the 4th try, and thought, absurdly, that she really should have replaced this lock in the fall like the man at the shop said. They read the contract in the office above the scale house at the Rolfe Street yard, because he would not have her come to his house, and she would not have him come to hers. The office had a window onto the weighbridge, and a space heater and a wall calendar from a truck parts distributor in Attleborough that was still showing November. Below them, in the dark, trucks came in loaded and went out light, and a man in a hooded sweatshirt wrote certified wait tickets by hand because the printer had been broken since Christmas. She read 91 pages out loud over 4 nights. He was terrible at it for the first hour, and then he was not. "Stop," he would say. "Say that again." "Seller shall indemnify purchaser against all losses arising from any breach of the representations in Article 4, provided that no claim may be brought after the survival period." Which is 12 months. Article 9, page 33. So on the 3rd of February next year, everything they told me stops being a promise. That's it. That's it. He wrote it on a yellow pad in block capitals, the way a man writes who does not trust his own handwriting. "See, that I understand. That's a shelf life." Nobody said shelf life. They said survival period. Why would you call it that? Because if they called it a shelf life, you'd know what it was. He looked at her. "Say that again," he said, and this time he was almost smiling, and she thought, uncharitably and correctly, that a man who is almost smiling at 11 at night in a scale house is a man who has not been talked to straight in years. Here was his problem. She named it out loud on the 2nd night, because it was late and she was tired, and the thing about being furniture is that eventually you forget to be careful. "You can hear a lie in your own language," she said. "You knew Renzo was lying in that room in February. I watched you know it. You looked at Larry, not at the page." "At the page." "You never look at the page. You've never once looked at a page in front of me in 3 years. You listen to the room and you read the men, and you're better at it than anybody I've ever written down. And then somebody hands you 11 lines of paper in a language you don't own, and they could put anything in it, and they did." He was quiet for a while. "My father signed with an X," he said. "Not because he couldn't write, because he decided at some point that if he was going to be robbed, he wanted it to take somebody effort." He turned the yellow pad around. "Keep going. Page 34. On the 3rd night, she reached across to point at a subsection, and he reached at the same time, and their hands stopped in the same 3 inches of air over the paper, and neither of them moved for a second. And then she pointed, and he looked, and the moment went into the pile of things that were not going to be mentioned. On the 4th night, he took her coat off the hook and held it, and she put her arms in the sleeves, and he did not touch her shoulders, though a man holding a coat can hardly avoid it, and she noticed that he had gone to some trouble not to, and she was annoyed at herself for noticing. "2 coats, she said, to say something. He told me why. He tells everybody why. It's the only story he has." He opened the office door onto the cold. "There's a bakery on Atwell's with a sign in the window that's been up since October. Hand-lettered. It says, 'Congratulations, Marie and Anthony,' and there's a date on it that's already gone by. Nobody takes it down. I go past it 4 times a day." "Why are you telling me that?" "No reason," he said. "That's what a reason looks like when there isn't one." The floor went out on Sunday. She went to see Bernadette Topper at the agency office on Waterman Street in a house with a porch to pull the file copy of the October job, because a reporting agency keeps everything forever in a system with a job number, and a job number is a thing you can prove to a federal prosecutor without ever handing over your notes. There was no job number. Bernadette sat behind a desk with a lamp on it and a photograph of Peg Mulcahy at somebody's retirement party on the wall behind her. She did not pretend, which Cricket would be grateful for later, and was not grateful for then. "It was off the books," Bernadette said. "What does that mean?" "It means Larry called me in October and asked for a reporter for a session that wasn't going to be billed. Cash, direct, no job number, no case caption, no copy in the system. It means you got paid $300 in an envelope, and I told you it was a favor for a good client. You told me it was a settlement conference. I told you what I was told. Bernie. Her own voice came out strange to her. There is no file copy. There is no invoice. There is no index entry. There's nothing in the system that says that meeting was ever reported by anybody. That's right. So the only proof that the 16th of October happened at all is a box of paper in my aunt's closet, and my dictionary, and me. Bernadette Topper, who had been doing this since cricket was in a car seat, put both hands flat on her desk. Yes, she said, and that is why they want the dictionary. She drove home the long way, past the courthouse, and sat at the light on Francis Street for 2 cycles without moving, and the thing she kept coming back to was not the danger. It was that Larry Corvese had arranged in October for the truest record of that year to exist without a name on it. He had wanted it to exist. That was the part she could not get around. A man who wanted no record at all does not hire a reporter. A man hires a reporter and takes the job off the books when he wants a thing to be true and deniable at the same time, which is what you do when you are 66 years old, and your son has started doing something you have decided not to look at directly. The deacon had built her an ark, and then told her not to read it. They came for the box on Sunday night at 9:40. There were 2 of them, and they were not good. That is the thing nobody puts in the movies. The first one came up the back stairs of a 3-decker in an ice storm in dress shoes. The back stairs of a 3-decker in an ice storm are a bad idea in boots. Biscuit started barking on the landing. That was the alarm system. A 12-year-old beagle with a bad hip who barked at the mailman and the wind. And now, finally, once in his life, at something. Cricket was at the kitchen table with October spread out in front of her, and her mother's trifold boxes stacked in 2 towers. And 2 coats Ferrucci was in the front room because Gennaro had put him there on Friday and would not discuss it. And Dot was downstairs asleep with the television on. The door came in. Second hit. The first man was in the kitchen before 2 coats got out of the chair, and he had a knife, which told her he had been told not to make noise, and he put it into Ferrucci's left forearm and dragged it, and it opened up like a seam giving out, and Ferrucci made a sound she had never heard a person make, low and surprised, almost a complaint. The second one, the young one, came in behind him and stopped in the doorway and looked at the paper on the table and said, "Which box?" to nobody, in a voice that was much too high. She threw the space heater at him. It was the nearest thing. It did nothing. Then the front door came open, and Gennaro Iannucci came through the front room and hit the first man twice in the side of the head with a stub of galvanized pipe that had been holding up her aunt's clothesline since the 1980s, and the man went down onto the linoleum and did not get back up, and Gennaro hit him again, once, and after that, it was over. The young one threw up in the hallway. He threw up, and then he sat down on the second stair with his hands hanging between his knees and cried, and he was maybe 20, and his sneakers were soaked through, and he kept saying that he was supposed to just carry the box. Ferrucci was on the floor holding his own arm closed with his other hand and swearing steadily in 2 languages, and there was more blood than she had understood there would be, a shocking amount, running under the refrigerator, and Gennaro knelt in it in his good trousers and got the dish towel off the oven handle and put it on and leaned. Hard. Ferrucci swore louder. "Belt," Gennaro said. She got the belt off the dead man because it was the nearest belt. His right hand had gone wrong. She could see it from where she was. The second and third knuckles had folded in on themselves, and the back of the hand was already coming up like dough. He was using it anyway. Every time he did, his mouth went thin. The kitchen clock on the wall said 9:51. She knew, because she looked at it, because that is a reflex she will have until she dies. Time first. Everything is a record or it is nothing. Give me your phone, she said. No. Give me your phone. Colleen. There is a dead man on my aunt's floor, she said, and my aunt is 71 years old and asleep downstairs, and the Fernandez family across the street is awake, because their light just went on, and if we carry a body out of this house tonight, then for the rest of my life, the truest thing about me is a lie I helped tell. So give me the phone, because I am going to call 911, and I am going to tell them what happened, which is that 2 men broke down a door and cut a man's arm open, and the 3rd man in the house stopped them. That is what happened. That is what I am going to say, because it is true, and I have spent 9 years learning that the only thing that will still be standing in 10 years is what actually got said. He looked at her from the floor. His hand was ruined, and he was kneeling in another man's blood on somebody's kitchen linoleum in a pair of trousers that cost more than her car, and he was, for about 2 seconds, at a loss. The record, he said. The record. He gave her the phone. She made the call at 9:54. She gave the address twice, the cross street, the number of people in the house, the nature of the injury, and the fact that a man was down and not breathing. She said her own name and spelled it. She spelled Ferrucci. She did not editorialize. Her voice on the recording that would later be played twice in a courtroom is so flat that the dispatcher asks her at one point if she is still there. Then the rest of it, which took until 4 in the morning. Providence police in the stairwell with the dog barking and barking. The rescue on the sidewalk with the doors open and the light going around. Dot in a housecoat on the 2nd landing saying over and over, "I have insurance, I have insurance," which is not a thing anybody had asked about. The young one giving his own name to the first officer through the open window of the cruiser before anyone had put a hand on him, because he wanted to, because he was 20 and it was over. 2 coats went to Rhode Island Hospital and got 41 stitches and a tendon repair, and told the surgical resident that he had done it on a chain-link fence, which nobody believed, and nobody needed to. Gennaro went in a separate car and let them splint the hand, and said nothing at all for 6 hours. That was on the advice of a lawyer he had called from the ambulance. The lawyer was not Larry Corvese. A patrolman asked her 4 times whether the clothesline pipe had been in the apartment or brought in, and each time she said, "It has held up my aunt's clothesline since before I was born," and each time he wrote it down as if she had said something new. The kitchen was not usable for 11 days. The company that came to do it wore respirators and taped plastic over the doorway. They used something enzymatic that got into her clothes and would not leave, and for 11 days everything she owned smelled like a swimming pool that had been used for something else. Dot moved in with her sister in Johnston and would not discuss it. And on Monday morning at 9 o'clock, 7.5 hours after they took the tape off the door, Colleen Mulcahy sat down at a folding table in a borrowed room and finished certifying a transcript because it was due and because her name was on it. He came to the scale house on Wednesday night with his hand in a splint from the wrist to the 2nd knuckle and a prescription he had not filled. She had the machine on the tripod because she had been working. He stood looking at it the way men look at it, which is with suspicion, as though it might be a trick. "Sit down," she said. "On the little chair." On the little chair. He sat. The stool put his knees up around the tripod, and he looked ridiculous and knew it and did not care, which was the first genuinely dangerous thing about him. "Left hand," she said. "The right one's out of service." Out of service. "Put your fingers here. That's the initial bank. There's no G. You want a G? You press T, K, P, W, all 4 at once, and the machine gives you a G." She moved his fingers with hers, one at a time, and neither of them said anything about that. "Now, your name starts with a G." He pressed all 4. badly so that one key hung. Again. He pressed again. It took. "That's a G," she said. "That's your name starting? Nobody in the world could read that paper except me. Not the government, not Larry, not your own lawyer. It's 22 keys and a theory I bent for 9 years until it only fits my hands." That's what they subpoenaed. Not the words. The key to the words. He sat with his one good hand on the keys of a machine he could not read, in a language he did not own, in a room above a weighbridge. And he laughed, once quietly at the back of his throat, like something coming loose. "My whole life," he said, "somebody has been holding the key to the words. I know. You know. I write them down for a living," she said. "You think I don't know who's holding what?" He stood up. The stool went over and neither of them picked it up. He was close enough that she could see the grain of the splint tape and the place at his jaw where he had shaved badly around a cut, and he put his good hand flat against the side of her face and did not do anything else with it, for long enough that it stopped being a question and became a decision. "Tell me to stop," he said. "No," she said. "Ask me something else." So he did, and she answered, and the answer took the rest of the night. The office light in the scale house went off a little after 2. At the far end of the yard, a man in a hooded sweatshirt wrote out weight tickets by hand until his shift ended, and the door at the top of the stairs stayed shut. And what happened past, it belongs to the two of them. In the morning she found her coat had been hung up. Not thrown on the chair. Hung on the hook, with the collar straightened, by a man with one working hand, which had taken him some doing. Assistant United States Attorney Adele Kirchner had a corner office in the federal building with a view of a parking structure and a wall of black binders that she had clearly read, all of them, twice. Cricket came with her own lawyer, a tired woman named Odile Fanning, who had taken the case for a flat fee after a 5-minute phone call, and with 2 flat boxes of tri-folded paper, and with her dictionary on a drive in her coat pocket, where it stayed. "You're going to tell me you can't produce," Kirchner said. "No, I'm going to produce." Kirchner sat back. "I'm going to produce a certified transcript of the 16th of October, Cricket said, "prepared and certified by me under my seal, and I will testify to its accuracy and submit to any examination you want on my methods, my machine, my audio, and my theory. What I am not doing is handing over my dictionary, because my dictionary translates every proceeding I have written in 9 years, including 400 sealed matters and 2 of your own grand juries, and if it leaves my hands, you will spend the next decade litigating everything I have ever certified. You don't want it. Somebody told you to ask for it because they wanted me frightened." The prosecutor did not move for a moment. "Who?" she said. "Read the transcript." She read it there, at her own desk, in front of them, which was not what Cricket expected. It took 11 minutes. Kirchner had a pen and did not use it. The thing about a record is that it does not argue. It sits there. On page 54 of the 16th of October, a man is offered by his own counsel's son the option of taking title personally for tax reasons, and he says no, and he is asked again, and he says the 11 words, and then he says one more thing that Cricket had not thought about until the 3rd time she read her own paper. He says, "Put it in the company. If they ever come for me, let them come for me. Don't let them come for the drivers." Adele Kirchner read that line twice. Cricket watched her do it. "Your Exhibit F," Cricket said, "was created on the 29th of January. Its own footer says so. The trustee swore under oath on the 12th of February that it existed in October. I wrote that oath. I have the page and line. And the reason the trustee needed a name on a deed is sitting in the civil docket in Superior Court, where a beneficiary is suing him for $406,000, that went out of the Rolfe Street Trust over 6 years in amounts under 10,000. You've been busy? I've been reading. It's a public docket. Anybody could have read it. 9 lawyers didn't, Kirchner said. 9 lawyers read the contract, Cricket said. That's a different thing. There was a long moment there, not a dramatic one. The sound of a copier running somewhere down the hall and the flat chemical warmth of toner in a building where the windows do not open. I've had a bad witness, Kirchner said at last, and it was not an apology, it was an accounting, and Cricket respected her for it. You've had a thief who needed a bigger thief to hide behind. And your man is what? A saint? My man moves freight, Cricket said, and I am not the person you ask about his soul. I'm the person you ask about what got said. That is the only thing I sell. If you want to build a case on him, build it on something that happened, not on a page he signed in a second and a half, because a man he trusted for 30 years sat down instead of standing up. Renzo Corvesi was arrested in April on 9 counts. Wire fraud, mostly. The perjury count came later, and it was the one that broke him, because a perjury count in a deposition is not a matter of testimony against testimony. It is a matter of a certified transcript, a document footer, and a woman with a seal. The deed was corrected. A civil judge on the 6th floor of the Licht building voided the nominee designation as procured by fraud in 1 paragraph and spent 4 more paragraphs on the conduct of an attorney of 30 years standing, and nobody in that courtroom looked at the back row where a reporter sat with a machine on a tripod, which was fine because she was working. Lawrence Corvesi surrendered his license in June rather than answer the 3rd question. He came to see her once before that in the coffee place on Waterman with the tables that wobble. I hired a reporter in October, he said. I know you did. I want you to know why. I know why, she said. He nodded. He looked at the table for a while and did not say the thing, and she let him not say it, because there are 2 kinds of record, and one of them is the kind you allow a person to keep. I should have stood up, he said. Yes, she said. You should have. At the end of it, on a Thursday in May with the windows open at the yard for the first time that year, Gennaro Iannucci asked her what she wanted. He did it badly. He had a list. He had a house on the east side he did not live in, and a number he had written on the yellow pad in block capitals, and the number had 6 figures in it, and he pushed the pad across the desk with his right hand, which had healed crooked and would stay crooked because he had never gone back for the follow-up. She turned the pad over and wrote on the clean side. 4 things, she said. 4 things. 1. 30 days. Not 90. Every reporter who works for you, not just me, gets paid in 30 days, and if you're late, I charge you interest, which is a thing I am allowed to do and have never once done because I was afraid of losing the work. Done. 2. A parking space in the yard, not for prestige, because in February I park on Bow Street and shovel my own car out at 6 in the morning, and I have done that for 9 winters, and I would like to stop. He wrote it down. He did not laugh, which he had half expected and would have forgiven. 3. My paper stays mine. Every note, every box, every drive. You don't ask for them, your lawyers don't ask for them, and if anyone ever asks me for them again, the answer comes from me and not from you. 3, he said. 4. She put the pen down. Every conversation in your business that matters gets a reporter in the room. Not a recorder. A reporter. And the appearance page has everybody's name on it who is in that room, including the person writing it down. You want to know why 9 lawyers missed it? Because the only person who heard what you actually said wasn't on the list of people who were there. He looked at the 4 items for a long time. She had thought he might argue about the 4th one. That would have been reasonable. Everything about his life ran on things not being written down. "That last one costs me more than the number on the other side of this page," he said. "Yes. You know that. I wrote 9 years of what it costs men like you to have nothing on paper," she said. "I know exactly what it costs." He picked up the pen with his ruined right hand, which he could do, badly, and turned the pad back over to the side with the block capitals and drew a line through the number. "Spell your name for me," he said. She was quiet for a second because he knew how to spell her name. He had said it in a laundromat in February over a dryer with a bad bearing and had never once gotten it wrong since. "Colleen," she said. "Mulcahy." And Gennaro Iannucci wrote it out at the top of the page in block capitals, slowly, pressing too hard, the way a man writes who has finally been given a word he owns. Then he handed her the pen and said, "Now put the date on it. You people always put the date on it." She did. Thursday, the 14th of May, 9:22 in the morning. She wrote it the way she had been taught at the top, before anybody sat down. "If this one got you, stay with us. We put up a new story every week, and every one of them finishes in one sitting. Tell us in the comments what your 4 things would have been. Make them small. Make them the ones you would actually use.